Welcome everyone to Ease India's webinar today. I'm Anita Nagarajan. I serve as chair of Ease India, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to our session. And a special welcome to our speaker and presenter for today, Hema Thakur. Today's session is a part of the webinar and training sessions that Ease India conducts and offers. We identify some needs and challenges that are specific to Ease India members or the Indian scholarly publishing community at large. But we also address global topics of interest to the scholarly communication sector. As part of that, we have with us today Hema Thakur. Welcome, Hema. Hema is an academic editor who has a BELS certification, and she has several years of experience in scholarly publishing. Today, she serves as manager of skill development at Cactus Communications. With experience in academic editing and client service, followed by her current role where she focuses on training and mentoring editors. Hema comes well-versed in many practices, best practices, current trends, and required skills for manuscript preparation and scholarly communication. It's just over a year since Hema's last webinar with us. So in 2025, Hema presented a webinar for Ease India, where she covered and touched on key skills and trends in academic manuscript editing. We will later share the link to the recording from her last year's webinar as well in the chat box. It was very well received, and we had many viewers for her recording as well. With that, let us move on to today's topic. What does manuscript editing mean today? What does gaining expertise in this particular role mean today with AI in the background, with evolving needs from clients and collaborators, whether they are author researchers, journals, or publishers? We have, all of us, I think, whether we're manuscript editors or we're collaborating with manuscript editors, we have lots of questions on AI and what's okay to do and how do we address that and who is a gatekeeper and what can manuscript editors do in this scenario. So we hope we have some of our questions may be addressed today by Hema, and we look forward to your thoughts as well. So before handing over to Hema, I'd like to welcome everyone once again and let you know that questions are welcome during the session. Please post them in the chat box. We will monitor them, and then we will have the last 10 minutes of the session devoted to responding to all your questions. All right, so with that, over to you, Hema.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anita, for the warm welcome and for letting me be a part of this. Good to see so many folks from so many different parts of the world. We have Jane, Kenneth, Sean, Kathy, so many more. And welcome once again to the session. I just wanted to do a very quick check. How many of you were able to attend last year's session? Or do we have like an entirely new batch? Maybe you can just say yes if you attended last year's session and no if you didn't in the chat box. I'll have a look at it. Okay, so we have a bunch of no's. Okay, so we have a new batch, which is great. Namrita has attended it. Did not know ease existed until this year. Okay, so we have quite a few no's with one or two yeses out there. So welcome back to those who did attend last year and those who did not. I am glad to see you folks for the first time. Just to reiterate what Anita said, this will be an interactive session. So if you all have any questions, any comments, please feel free to use the chat box, which I'll be monitoring from time to time. My second question was, what are you looking forward to in today's session? any question that you have beforehand itself, that you hope would be addressed in today's session, just to have an understanding of that. Hmm. Yes, Mary, I expect there will be questions about AI as well. Especially, I think in the poll on LinkedIn, we saw, a couple of comments about how can we as editors outshine AI today because, well, we've got to face the fact that it is our biggest competitor today. So again, okay, yes, how can we offer useful support to authors and researchers? What is different today in the age of AI? Okay, great. So, keeping that in mind, I'm going to start sharing my screen and I'll turn off the video so that there are no bandwidth issues in the meanwhile. Adishri has also commented ways to be a better editor. I've always been an academic editor, thinking from a I used to be a researcher. So, that confirmation bias that comes along with it, I completely get that, Adishri. Um, Okay, so I am just going to share my screen and we can start there after. So, welcome once again to this session on academic editing in the current landscape. So, just before we begin, a very brief overview of Editage. So, we are a global academic editing and publication support service that we work closely with researchers, authors, and journals. So, our core focus is in helping research communication become clearer and more structured and publication ready, while of course preserving the author's original intent. And we all know how important that is in academic writing. Um, I noticed a lot of you had said no, you all haven't attended last year's session. So the good news is it is not a prerequisite, right, to have attended last year's session. But if you do want to go through it, the YouTube link can be shared with you. And you all can go through it at your own pace after the session as well. And if you did attend, don't worry, we are not going to be repeating the same content. We are going to build on it with new examples and newer challenges, and of course, the impact of AI over the last year. So this slide is basically a quick recap of what we discussed last year. We discussed how our definition of effective editing has changed over time, and if I remember correctly, a lot of us agreed that it's increasingly playing a role way beyond language and grammar, right? So we discussed some core competencies that are relevant even today, or especially more relevant today in the AI landscape, and some examples of what AI tends to get right or wrong. But I want to ask this batch the same question. So I'm going back to the chat box. What um, core competencies do you think are relevant today or are gaining relevance today? Or, in other words, what skills do you think are more important for you today in order to outshine AI? I'll be having a look at the chat box. Please don't feel shy to respond. There's no right or wrong answer. The word taste on my feed a lot. Uh, just let me scroll this thing. Knowledge of research integrity. Mhm. Anything else that comes to mind? Editorial skills, interpersonal skills, human voices, exactly. Any other responses? Attention to detail. Yep. Humanizing the AI text. Yes, that's a very common request I think we all get. Knowledge outside of just language, communication, suggest better ways to communicate. Exactly, exactly. What's acceptable in AI use and what's not. Okay, great. So, right. So, a couple of these overlap with the skills that we discussed I think last year, because even here in the chat box, we've mentioned about knowledge integrity, and communication, I think, has been a recurring theme in the chat box. So we also spoke about how to communicate with authors in tricky scenarios, when suppose we notice that AI has been used. Is it something that we essentially need to communicate? If we notice that there are some plagiarism issues, do we need to communicate it? Or if we want to give some constructive feedback that, everything is in place, but the idea, or let's say the topic is novel, but the novelty doesn't for some reason come forth. um Communicating all of that. We also discussed how important it is to tailor our content to, or tailor our editing, sorry, to the needs of the target journal. So AI tends to produce fairly standardized output, whereas, we require a much more nuanced approach depending on context. There will be some journals that are okay with the use of jargon because they are highly specialized. Others are not, for instance. And of course, subject area expertise. Somebody spoke about knowledge that is always going to be there. So it's actually great that we have some overlap with the core competencies discussed last time, because I mean, we can see that, they are still here. So they are robust to changes in the tech landscape. So many changes have happened in AI over the past years, but the core competencies have remained more or less the same, which is actually encouraging. Um, Now in today's session, we are going to have a look at two sides of AI in academic editing. We're going to have a look at how AI performs as an editor and in what ways can we outshine it, and how it performs when acting as a writer. So, one thing, when, how many of you have gotten queries from authors that, can you humanize my text? Maybe just a yes if you'll have received any queries from authors to humanize the text. Hmm. Anita says yes. Kathy, Shalmali. Anik, interestingly, hasn't gotten such queries so far. Okay. And I've had to say no. Okay. All right. So, basically, just to draw the line in terms of AI being used as a writer, a lot of journals are permitting authors to take AI assistance in terms of phrasing. But of course, it shouldn't be used to draft the core idea of the manuscript, to obviously to fabricate data and everything. That's where the line is drawn. But the thing is, it's not possible for us to say 100% whether something is AI written or not. There are markers for sure. Uh, but let's say we notice something that may or may not be AI written. It's difficult to, we can't, point fingers at the author. This seems to be written by AI. So do we even need to bring that up, or do we instead focus on the gaps that are there in the manuscript because it seems to have been written by AI, and instead query the author about those gaps, right? So we're going to talk about communication as well. And when there is and when we are asking authors about these gaps, the next question would naturally be, can't AI itself ask the author these questions, right? Are we required? So we are going to have a look at how well AI performs in this regard, or the limitations of AI in asking these questions. And of course, when there are questions, there are answers as well from the author. The author will get back to us with some answers, incorporate some of our suggestions, send us a revised version of the manuscript. So that way, editing becomes a sort of iterative process, right? So we are going to have a look at how AI plays a role in this iterative process, how it's able to evaluate author responses to these questions. In addition to all of this, we will also be covering visual communication, something we didn't focus on in the previous session. And I'll be sharing, a few key resources with you towards the end of the session. And we will end with an important thing that I wanted to highlight once again is that it's going to be very interactive. I'll be asking you a few questions throughout, and I'm hoping to hear your responses in the chat. The effectiveness of the session obviously depends on that engagement, so I would encourage you to participate actively. And of course, a lot of you may have attended or come across theoretical discussions on AI, where we often hear statements like, AI can do this, but cannot do that. While that kind of framing I feel is useful to a point, today's session is going to be a lot more practical and grounded, because we'll be working through real examples rather than abstract explanations. So, one important thing is that these examples are not going to be doctored or, simplified. They are based on actual conversations with AI, which is why you're going to see links to a lot of AI conversations embedded in the presentation. Once this presentation is shared with you after the session, I would highly encourage you to go through these conversations, to have a look at the transcripts in detail and understand its limitations, because the idea is not about taking my word for it. It's something that you need to verify as well. And I always say with AI, the best way to learn about it is to dabble with it, right? Take it for a spin. um okay, so that being said, the session does focus a lot on its limitations, but that is not to discredit AI. It is to understand where we play, and a greater role in today's landscape. So yeah, without further ado, I think we can get started with the examples. So okay, this slide is a bit text heavy, so I'm going to walk you through what is going on here. So we have two panels on the slide. On the left, it's an original abstract, and on the right, you will see the version edited by GPT along with the link, right? So just to briefly summarize the study on the left side, so the background is that after COVID-19, online education became a lot more prominent, but there's still a lot of uncertainty about how effective it actually is, which is why the study aims to address this question, and it goes on to describe the methodology and the results and everything. And the results are generally positive. Basically, it suggests improvements in student outcomes as a result of online teaching. So you need not go through the left side. What I do want you to do is maybe take a minute or two to go through the right panel. Okay. And in the chat box, tell me if you all notice something amiss. Maybe with language, maybe with grammar, maybe with structure, or the quality of writing, whatever it be. Again, no right or wrong answers. From a critique perspective, what's amiss in the right side? Let's discuss that. And I'll probably keep this open for a minute before I switch to the chat box. I am going to have a look at the chat box if there are any immediate answers during to over. Okay, let me zoom in the screen. Sorry about that. Uh, just a second. I'll just scroll down. Maybe I can just check it once more. This is clearly better. Uncanny valley effect. Use of non-standard dashes that are longer than normal ones. The observations are not entirely clear. Something seems to be missing. Okay, so I think we all have, found a bunch of issues already. Um, and yes, while the language and grammar is kind of in place, because I mean, giving credit to the language. Okay, there are some issues with the language despite it being largely in place, especially, for example, I think over here it had retained, yeah, experimental within quotes for whatever reason. But another thing is, I think somebody had pointed out that the observations are not entirely clear. So, could we maybe try to focus a little more on that? So, basically, I can give you a clue. It's about quantitative versus qualitative findings. There's a structural issue with respect to that. No information about the participants exactly. Mhm. But again, there's a sort of mismatch between the methods and the results with respect to the quantitative and qualitative description. Maybe if I can just, I think this is too zoomed out. Just give me a second. So, for example, over here in the methodologies, we have said that this article presents the results of a teaching research project that analyzes from a quantitative perspective the impact of students' active participation, etc., etc. So we framed it as a quantitative study. But over here, we suddenly speak about qualitative findings that seem to sort of jump out at us from nowhere, right? So yeah, basically the entire study is framed around a quant approach, but suddenly we see these qualitative insights appearing without any clear indication that in the methodology that student feedback was also sought. Now, how we address this, we'll have a look at it in just a bit. But before that, I wanted to have a look at the second, and don't worry, the final example of this slide. Not all slides are going to be text heavy like this. But yeah, once again, the second passage on the left side, you have the original one where we are basically talking about the effect of economic development on different types of crimes. And on the right side, you have the version edited by GPT along with the link. So, once again, I think we can focus on the right slide and taking the request into consideration. I'll zoom in. Hopefully, this is better. We can take a minute and perhaps share our observations about this passage in terms of what is amiss in the chat box. And I shall check the chat box in, let's say, a minute or so. Maybe I can check it now. Can we have both versions in the frame? Okay, sure. It's just that it will be a little smaller to read. But okay, I can keep it this way. Let me have a look at the chat. Any thoughts on this one? Better written than the original, for sure. Besides that, do you notice something amiss? It's more structured, definitely. Okay, definitely. Giving credit where it's due, AI, or I mean, in terms of writing, readability, etc., it definitely does a good job. But again, focusing on what seems to be amiss and what sort of role we can play. Maybe I can give a few clues or ask a few questions. Um, okay, one question is whether pooled needs to be capitalized, because it seems to have retained the capitalization from the original. But a more important question is that do we include limitations in the abstract? In general, do we include limitations in the abstract? The conflicting findings need to be better explained. Exactly, Shalmali. That's another point that I'm going to get to. But yeah, about my question, do we include limitations in the abstract? Do we need to emphasize them? No, exactly, exactly. So, limitations, yes, it's important to include in the limitation section in the manuscript if you have a separate one, or maybe just the conclusions or the methodology where you're, justifying it. But over here, we seem to have sort of uh, retained the author's framing, which forms an unbalanced panel data set. We've retained the framing in terms of forming an unbalanced panel data set. Now, again, that might be relevant to the methodological context, given that panel data often involves, a bunch of missing observations or irregular time coverage. So, from a technical standpoint, it's not incorrect. From a readability standpoint, it's not incorrect. But the editorial question is that, okay, number one, do we need to include it? And if we do need to include it, what is the best way to frame it? And I think, as Shalmali correctly said, that there are contrasting findings here that economic development does lead to an increase in certain crime types, but it leads to a decrease in certain crime types, but it also leads to an increase in money laundering. So there is a contrast over here that is not very well highlighted, and that is kind of undersold in the implications. It's also like, oh, by the way, development also leads to increase in money laundering, rather than, as a surprising finding. So again, the findings are sort of undersold over here, which we will come to in a bit in terms of how to address it. Okay, so now, just to briefly, summarize what we've collectively observed so far. AI shows a degree of prompt bias. So, it retained experimental within hanging quotes. It retained something else. Yeah, the capitalized pooled as well. And more importantly, it can struggle with, deeper structural and logical alignment, as we saw those examples where the contrast is not clear, the qualitative and quantitative thing as well. And it may not always be sensitive to genre specific or section specific editing. Like I said, why are we highlighting the limitations in the abstract, right? So given that it is an abstract, and not any standard document type, I have also listed, where we can step in over here, but this maybe we can go through once we receive the presentation in the interest of time. What I do want to focus on is how we would revise these, right? So the bit about quantitative and qualitative results, since the methodology specified only quant, but the results also said something about qualitative. Now, how we revise this depends on our editorial judgment, right? So if we feel that the quantitative and qualitative results carry equal weight, in the methodology, then we can just, say something like the study uses a mixed methods approach, or that it integrates both quantitative and qualitative analysis. That's one option. But if, the survey bit where we ask students how they feel about the outcomes, if that is just supportive in nature, so the main study is quantitative, but we use student feedback just to, complement the primary findings, then maybe we can retain the first sentence about the quantitative methodology as is, and have, an additional and independent clause where we also say that qualitative insights or survey data was used to validate or support the quantitative results. And this is where your editorial judgment becomes very important, because there are multiple valid alternatives, and, your role is to decide which framing best reflects the study's actual design and contribution, because you're going through the entire paper, right? Even in the case of experimental group, even if we replace it with, the more standard phrasing experiment group, and we drop those hanging quotes, is that sufficient? Or, in this context, do we want to explain what the experiment group consists of? Students who were exposed to a certain type of intervention. So the options for that are listed over here, right? um Now, for the unbalanced panel data set, like I said, we don't have to emphasize the limitations, but should we want to retain it, there are a bunch of options. If we want to acknowledge the fact that there were missing observations, but we have accounted for them, let's just say we analyze data from so and so, accounting for missing observations. Here we are acknowledging that there are missing observations, but we are focusing on the fact that we have accounted for them, right? So it doesn't come across as a limitation. If we absolutely want to retain unbalanced, instead of having it as a separate clause that stands out, can we not, integrate it over here using unbalanced panel data over the so and so period? So it doesn't come across as a separate limitation, right? So again, the framing depends on your judgment, if it is, central to the methodology, and, you would want to retain it. Now, pooled is relatively straightforward. It was just about the capitalization bit, so I won't spend much time on that. Yeah, about the contrasting findings, like someone rightly pointed out, that it was not, completely clear, or it was undersold, as I said, where development reduces certain types of crime, but also it's also associated with increased money laundering. So this is where framing becomes increasingly important. One, the very basic way to sort of make that contrast clear is, using better transition words like however, in contrast, etc. But if we feel that even that is not enough, um, because we are not dealing with a sort of uniform effect across all crime categories. We are dealing with sort of differentiated effects where, the direction and magnitude sort of depends on the type of crime being examined. So maybe we can say something like, development has heterogeneous effects across crime types, which then supports the need for maybe crime specific policy responses rather than generic interventions. There are a bunch of options that you all can go through once you'll receive it. So what I mean is that the novelty is already there. It's not something that we have to come up with ourselves as editors. That is not our role. But it is important that we bring that novelty, that we highlight that novelty, and that we present it in the best possible light. We're giving the author the best possible chance over here. Okay, so far we've had a look at AI in editing mode. But what about AI in writing, right? Like some of us said that we do receive, you know, requests to humanize it. So, maybe we can discuss quickly whether we have received manuscripts that, we felt were written by AI, and you're quite sure of it, but you cannot prove it. And my second question is, if we look at these sentences, these are individual independent sentences from different papers. And I can give it away to you right now that it is written by AI, these sentences, right? But what are the sort of markers? What makes us feel that these are written by AI? What sort of gives it away? Maybe I can have a look at the chat box in the meanwhile. A lot of hyphenated terms. Mhm. What else sort of gives it away? The use of triads. Absolutely. Okay. There are a couple of clear markers here: flattening of voice. The meaning is not very clear. There's ambiguity, right? So AI, to put it frankly, is good at saying a whole lot of nothing, right? It can be deceptively polished. There are a lot of buzzwords over here contributing to the ambiguity that we have noted in the chat box, right? So things like resilience oriented structural optimization and enhanced uncertainty qualification, and all of those buzzwords that appear over here kind of give it away. Now, like I said, it's important to note that if the author has acknowledged that they have used AI, and if the journal permits AI, as long as the author acknowledges AI assistance, it is not something that we always have to actively address. But again, if we are requested to address just the phrasing bit, and if it is within the scope of the service that we offer, how do we go about doing that? All right. So this is a quick cheat sheet. Don't worry, we won't go through all the categories, but the idea is that whenever you come across any construct like the ones that we know, the ones that we listed on the previous slide, when you come across those constructs that seem to be written by AI, try to analyze what exactly it's trying to claim. Okay. So if it is trying to claim that the study sort of discovered something, or leads to an improvement, or it leads to a change of a certain magnitude or size, or a comparison where it says that it claims the superiority of one treatment over the other, so the first step is just try to identify what the sentence is trying to claim, and then map it to certain questions. First, we ask ourselves these questions. All right. So if the sentence is claiming an outcome, what specifically improved, what was observed, what findings support this outcome, etc. All right. Now, these questions, what we need to do is to try to find the answers to them within the manuscript itself. All right. Uh, because these are individual sentence fragments that we looked at. They may be vague, but giving the author the benefit of the doubt, maybe they have actually elaborated on this in other sections like the methodology and the result. So try to glean that information yourself. So context is another thing that benefits from human intervention, right? You are editing the entire paper, you have complete context. But if it is absolutely not available in the methodology, results, etc., that's when you would want to seek the author's inputs by asking them the same questions, perhaps in a tone that is more suitable, right? Um, so if we go through the first one, right? The proposed methodology facilitates performance driven design refinement under complex loading scenarios, very AI-esque. But at least we can try to identify the claim is about some sort of improvement or refinement. So it's a comparative sort of claim. We map it to certain questions based on what we saw in the previous slide, and let us say we either find the answers to those questions in the manuscript itself, or we ask the author those questions and we get the answers. The revised sentence may look something like this. Again, it's not set in, it's not set in stone or anything of that sort, because I'm just saying, suppose these are the answers to the questions, right? So this looks a lot more, comprehensive and clear. The after intervention bit, when we ask what exactly is being studied, stress distributions out here in the first bit. Um, Under what conditions? Okay, we see it's under tensile and compressive loading. Why are we doing this? To determine how loading conditions affect so and so. This is when we have, and of course, like I said, sometimes it does require the author inputs. We are not supposed to come up with this information ourselves as editors. But again, like I said, that communication is also part of our role. um and so because we have all of this information, the sentence is sort of doing a specific job. Again, it's up to your editorial discretion if you want all of that to be together in one sentence, or you want to split it, as long as it appears within the same paragraph and the reader has enough context without having to go through the entire manuscript, right? Likewise, you can go through the rest of the examples, but my aim over here was to introduce you how to interpret and sort of apply this cheat sheet that I am sharing with you. Now we've looked at, a bunch of individual sentences or fragments. Let's have a look at this entire passage over here that seems to be AI written. So again, I would probably give you a minute to go through this. Just glance over it. We don't have to edit it. We don't have to make any changes. All we need to do is think of what questions would you ask the author. Since this is AI written, clearly there are some gaps that the author needs to address. What are those sort of questions? And maybe you can share those questions that you would need to ask the author in the chat box. Maybe I can have a look at the chat box right away. Thank you, Anita, Adishri. Me screaming, what does it mean? Details about the sample. Which individuals, where from exactly? That is very unclear. Who are the participants that we are, talking about? Anything else? Since we've received just one response, I think, from Kimita. I'll just wait for a few more seconds in case anybody wants to add anything. Mm, I guess the statistics as well, more details, any data, exactly. It's too general. Data needed. Yes. So all of us agree that the actual occupations, exactly the demographic. So all of us agree that there's missing data, there's missing information out there that we would want to ask the author about. Now, all of these questions have come to us quite intuitively. We immediately said, we immediately pointed out the need for additional data. But just in case we need additional support when we are working on, 10,000 word manuscripts and we have a bunch of journal, deadlines to meet, this is another cheat sheet that the previous one was about individual sentences. What are they trying to claim, and what are the questions we should ask? But for section level stuff, like this is an entire paragraph, maybe an entire abstract. So again, we have questions mapped to each part, like questions mapped to the background, questions mapped to the objective, etc. It's just the same thing as last time, but on a larger scale. um and this on this slide you'll find, suppose we have the answer to those questions, how would it look after that? Either when if we find the answers within the manuscript itself, or we procure those answers from the author, how would the sentences look after that? And once all of these are stitched together, how will it look? This stitched together, that would be the revised version of the abstract. But in the interest of time, I wanted to highlight something important, right? If we are doing this exercise of asking questions ourselves, but does it always need human intervention, right? Can AI also generate these questions, and are we needed over here? Could it eventually sort of replace us even at this stage of editorial thinking, where we are asking authors for data and stuff. So here I'm showing you an actual screenshot from a GPT conversation, where I basically shared the passage, the AI written passage, in a separate window without any context that it's AI written and everything. And I asked that, do you have any questions about this research from an editorial or a subject expert perspective? Now, just take a look at the questions that it generates, and you have the GPT link over here as well. And can you tell me, which of these questions are, perhaps unnecessary? Because our goal is not to produce a long list of questions, and that doesn't actually reflect expertise. It shows that you are unsure about everything, and it kind of overwhelms the author or just simply annoys the author. So, can you tell me, which among these questions is actually unnecessary? Number four, two, four. Exactly. Four is a very popular choice. Why are we asking about the age range being 18 to 28 when we know it's about Gen Z, right? So that ability to decide what is sort of relevant and what adds value still requires your editorial expertise. Now we've had a look at questions, but like I said, editing is an iterative process. So when there are questions, there will be answers as well. And authors will come back to us maybe for another round of editing. And because we are not the only players over here, there's peer reviewers as well. Sometimes authors may have their papers peer reviewed and come back to us to check if their answers address the peer reviewer comments, or if their revisions are sufficient. Now, how does AI perform in determining or evaluating the quality of author responses? There's a whole study conducted about that, that I've shared a link to. These links are shared, but I'll just give you a few examples. Maybe I'll just focus on the first two, where one peer reviewer basically told the author that they've covered a laundry list of aspects without any prioritization. Whereas over here, the author has just, they've said that they basically defined each term, but that does not address your reviewer feedback, because I mean, it's still a laundry list, even if it is expanded or, well defined. You've not prioritized anything, so you've not addressed the reviewer's concern. Over here, the reviewer has said, I failed to understand self reported survey. And over here, the author sort of explains what does self reported survey mean. But the reviewer likely means they fail to understand, why the author has used the self reported survey over here. Or, so they're asking for a sort of justification of the methodology, not for a definition of what a self reported survey is. So the author kind of took it a little literally over here. So, was AI able to identify those mistakes according to what we found across GPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude? We found that AI kind of tended to agree with the author, like, okay, you did a good thing by expanding, beyond listing and providing the definitions, or you did a good thing by explaining what is self reported survey, right? Again, with the research, we have the transcripts to the AI conversations and everything, and these are actual screenshots. So AI is great for validation, but if you want that sort of accuracy, it's not the best. Okay, so let me see how much time we have left. Accordingly, I'll decide the pace for the remaining. Okay, we have around 5 minutes left. Uh, so maybe taking a break from all of this, we can focus on the sort of visual elements. All right. So, how many of you have come across AI generated images in academic manuscripts? Maybe a very quick yes or no. Yes. Okay, we have a bunch of yeses. Spare me the AI generated images, exactly. So these were some very embarrassing images generated by AI. I think back in 2020, that even led to paper retractions. But once again, credit where it's due, AI has improved significantly over time. So these are some images that are more reflective of its quality and its lapses today. But we'll see that there are still some issues. So maybe very quickly, we can just have a look at the visuals on this slide and point out whatever comes to our mind. So our responses in the chat box don't have to be about all the visuals, and they don't have to be about all the elements in a certain visual. Like if you notice any one thing amiss, you can perhaps mention that in the chat box and we can go through that. Anything amiss in these visuals? The icons? Exactly. The icons are mismatched with the topics. The plant does not seem to be related to autonomy, the fire to belief, etc. In this bottom panel, we have the same icon used for excellent accuracy as well as moderate accuracy for whatever reason. This one is more like, from basically a textbook, what sort of CH bonds exist, etc. It's not so, it doesn't explain what the study contributes. And in this one, we have some different ways to measure methane emissions. And all of these are valid ways, but for whatever reason, in the bottom panel, we focus just on one of these ways. Again, perhaps that's because the study focuses just on that. But figures should be understood independently of the rest of the text. We shouldn't be inferring anything as readers. um Likewise, in the next slide again, this is the final exercise for now. After that, we will go to Q&A. In this slide, do you all notice anything amiss in the figures? Okay, so over here we say that there's no correlation between these two variables, yet we have this link emoticon, or this link icon, I mean. What the author means is that even when this is greater, this is smaller. So greater of x does not lead to greater of y. But again, we cannot say that more of x is linked to lower of y, because that still means that there is a negative correlation. So this link icon is absolutely incorrect. Likewise, over here, where n is equal to 10 and we are working with a very small sample size, why are we using donut charts, right? Because percentages, we know, can be deceptive when especially when there's a small sample size, and this can definitely sort of invite reviewer scrutiny. I understand that, given the paucity of time, we may have wanted to sort of delve deeper and kind of figure this out ourselves. But yeah, this was just to have a general idea of, again, why human intervention is also required in making figures and critiquing AI generated figures. Now, before I close, I just wanted to quickly share that there's a cheat sheet over here with everything put together, because it may not always be feasible to go through the slides and everything. So we have all of the workshop content, the important tables and everything put together. If you click on this link, you'll be able to access it. For the activity, I think I can give you a key that you can compare your answers against at the end of the session. And yeah, Anita, as you said, we can move to the Q&A. And if I'm not able to answer, or if you need to move out of the session at any point, you can always mail me your questions at the email ID I am sharing here. Just give me a second. Okay, so yeah, we can go ahead and take the questions. I don't see questions in the chat box. Anita, maybe you can help me with them.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Hema. Those examples were really useful. And I think you've given us a lot of homework to do. Perhaps if there's interest among participants, if you'd like to review all the examples when we share the slides, if you want to have 1 hour online discussion with the participants here, if you want to exchange your thoughts, we're happy to organize that. So please do write into us if you'd like to have a 1 hour hands-on session just to focus on some of the examples from today. We can see how to make that happen. Let me move to the questions. Hema, there's one question here from Kimeta. How can you identify AI-generated texts in languages other than English? Most plagiarism detectors do not check the text for AI if it is not in English. Can you recommend a reliable plagiarism detector program?
So this one's tricky because even if it is in English, you will receive varying scores from everybody, from different sources. So I would maybe need to check this separately. Which sort of tools can help over here. But again, about how to identify it ourselves, like I said, it's also about identifying the gaps in whichever language it may be. There will be certain gaps that AI has left because it's not going to, come up with the details about the participants, about the data and everything itself. It will leave some of the other gap, and that's, an easy marker or a sort of indicator that it may have been written using some sort of assistance.
Okay. Thank you, Kimeta, for the question. And if Hema comes across a tool that could be used, she may send it to us later. We'll share it with you. Hema, there's one question from Michael. Michael asks, can AI be programmed to apply the rules outlined in style manuals, such as the APA or the CSE guidelines?
Yes, there are definitely certain tools. It's actually good for formatting, and I would say definitely explore them. Once again, the names of those tools I would perhaps need to get back about separately. But I mean, for example, we do have some in-house tools here as well. So I always say, use it where it can be used, so that aspects that require subtler aspects that do require our intervention can actually benefit from it. Merops is an example. It's an example. It does quite well with formatting.
Hema, if you'd like to just type that in the chat box, maybe for those who need it, they can use it as a reference, the name. Thank you. And maybe we'll take one last question. We just have 1 minute to go because I'm sure many manuscript editors are encountering this one. So just have 30 seconds if you can respond to what is the best way to convince a client who is lowballing you by saying that AI can do this, that they are paying for a premium service?
Mm, could you perhaps elaborate on that?
When a client asks, how do you convince a client that about the usefulness or the utility that a manuscript editor brings in, because they claim that AI can do all of this, and why should they
Um,
pay for this?
yeah,
Is
yeah.
that,
So
I
I
hope,
think
Adashri, I hope I got the question right. If not, please let us know.
I think sort of this transcript thing actually works quite well for me as well in terms of convincing people. So giving them a sort of transcript that this is how AI has worked on XYZ, and these are the additional changes that I would make to your passage. It does not have to be to the whole passage. It can just be to a certain paragraph, or where you share a transcript that GPT has worked on it in so and so way, and this is how I would do it differently, so that the client is actually able to see that value that you bring to the table.
Great. Thank you very much,
Thank
Hema.
you so
And
much. I would also
if
love
there
to hear if anybody has any feedback, and if they are okay to hang around for a bit and type their feedback in the chat
Yes.
box.
I think they will also, Mary and Lucy, when they send out the email with the recording link, they will also invite feedback. I think one suggestion that we had from one participant is that maybe the next time we could consider sharing the examples
Absolutely.
before the
Yes.
webinar so that they can. Thank you for the suggestion, and we
Thank
will definitely. Yes, Lucy has confirmed that we will send out a feedback form soon. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Hema, for a great session, for all the examples. I'm sure we all have a lot of work to do to go and review them. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope you found the session useful. And like I said, if you're interested in a follow-up session just to discuss the examples from today, we can do a hands-on 1 hour session. We'll see how to organize that. Please write to us with that note, and we'll see how to take that forward. Thank you, Mary and Lucy, as always, for making the webinar happen, for all the support behind the scenes. And that's it from us. Please do join us if you'd like at our next Ease India webinar in July, in which we'll talk about ethical challenges in maintaining research integrity in the age of Gen AI. Thank you for your active participation and for all your responses and questions. Have a great day.
you, everybody. Have a great day. Bye bye.